What is a man's life worth when he dares defy a king? That unspoken question echoed across Edward I's realm in 1305. For William Wallace, known as Wilhelmus le Walis, in official English records, the answer was not negotiation, but destruction. Wallace had risen to prominence during Scotland's uprising against English rule. On September 11, 1297, at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, he and Andrew Moray achieved a landmark victory. But it was no reckless charge. Wallace and Moray held back until half the English army had crossed the narrow bridge, then launched a devastating assault, trapping their enemy between the river and rising ground. The tactical brilliance turned terrain into a weapon. Moray, however, died shortly after from battle wounds, leaving Wallace as the sole guardian of Scotland. The triumph was brief. In July 1298, Edward I personally led an army to face Wallace at the Battle of Falkirk. There, Wallace's forces collapsed, not merely due to miscalculation but because the Scottish cavalry deserted and English longbowmen tore through the tightly packed schiltrons of Scottish infantry. It was a tactical disaster. After Falkirk, Wallace resigned as guardian. Rather than fade into the Highlands, he embarked on a diplomatic mission to France circa 1299-1303, seeking international support for Scotland's cause. He lobbied in the French court and appealed to Pope Boniface VIII, portraying Scotland as a nation oppressed by foreign conquest. These efforts gained sympathy but no significant military aid. Wallace returned by 1305, still a symbol of resistance. But betrayal awaited him. Sir John de Menteith, a Scottish knight loyal to Edward, captured Wallace near Glasgow. English accounts describe it as treachery. He was taken to London, in chains. His capture was a blow to Scottish morale. Wallace's face, weathered by war and hardship, became the face of resistance. His arrest echoed from village to village. In England, it was celebrated as the final fall of a rebel. But in Scotland, people wept, cursed Menteith's name, and whispered of vengeance. Wallace had become more than a soldier, he had become a symbol. And now that symbol was shackled and thrown before the very crown he fought to oppose. The world would soon witness what England did to symbols. Dragged through the crowded streets of London on August 23, 1305, William Wallace, filthy, chained, and worn by years of warfare and exile, was brought before the royal court at Westminster Hall. The space, vast and echoing with the murmur of nobles and judges, had witnessed many trials. But this was not justice, this was condemnation. Wallace was charged with treason against King Edward I, as well as robbery, murder, and inciting war. But Wallace refused to acknowledge the charge of treason. According to chronicler Walter of Hemmingberg, Wallace declared he had never sworn allegiance to Edward, and therefore could not be a traitor. To the English, this was irrelevant. Treason was not a matter of oaths but of defiance. Edward I had no patience for legal niceties. The trial lasted only a brief time. There were no advocates for the defense, no witnesses, and no appeals. The sentence was predetermined. He was condemned to the severe and symbolic punishment used for high treason in medieval England, a sentence designed to humiliate and destroy both body and legacy. This gruesome sequence was not just a form of execution, it was a deliberate statement of power. The crown sought not only to kill Wallace but to destroy the idea he represented. Wallace was then imprisoned in the Tower of London, likely in the Salt Tower or a similar chamber reserved for political prisoners. There, he endured hours of humiliation and likely abuse. Food was minimal, cleanliness non-existent, days in chains, sleepless nights, and a final silence hung over the man once called Guardian of Scotland. No record remains of his final words or thoughts. Chroniclers do not describe any confession or conversion. What is known is that he faced his final days without any show of remorse. He had lived by his cause, and now he would die by it. On the night before his execution, guards patrolled heavily around his cell. The tower's walls echoed with whispers. Some said Wallace prayed, others claimed he stared quietly at the stars, as if bidding farewell to the land he had fought for. Even in captivity, his silence unnerved the English. He would not beg. He would not bow. He remained unbroken. At dawn on August 23, 1305, the streets of London stirred for a public execution unlike any other. William Wallace was to die in the most agonizing and dishonorable way English law could devise. The method was no secret: hanging, drawing, and quartering. Wallace was first stripped and tied to a hurdle, a crude wooden frame, then dragged by horse from the Tower of London to Smithfield. This journey of nearly 2 miles was brutal by design. Spectators jeered. Children threw refuse. He was battered by the road, exposed to the filth and indignity that marked a traitor's final procession. By midday, Wallace reached Smithfield, then a field outside the city walls known for executions and public punishments. A scaffold had been prepared. Ropes, hooks, and knives were ready. There would be no swift death. First, Wallace was hanged by the neck, not until death, but until he hovered on the edge of unconsciousness. His body convulsed as air was cut off. But he was cut down before death could claim him. The executioner's goal was not efficiency, it was spectacle. Next came the most agonizing phase. According to chroniclers like Walter of Guisborough, Wallace endured a punishment designed to inflict maximum suffering. He was emasculated, disemboweled, and his entrails burned before his eyes, all while he was still alive. Only then was he beheaded. But even in death, Wallace's body was not granted peace. His remains were divided and sent across the kingdom as a warning to others. The purpose was unmistakable: to crush not only Wallace, but the very idea of Scottish rebellion. His head, preserved and placed atop London Bridge, greeted all who entered the city. It stood not simply as a symbol of justice, but of conquest, emblematic of Edward I's desire to erase Wallace's rebellion from both land and memory. His body was divided, with each section sent to a different city in the north of England and southern Scotland: Newcastle, Berwick, Perth, and Stirling. These cities had all witnessed the flames of resistance, and now they were made to confront its physical remnants. Some traditions, particularly in places like Aberdeen, later claimed possession of Wallace's remains, with stories of secret burials surfacing over time. In Cambuskenneth Abbey, near Stirling, it was whispered that monks retrieved one of his quarters for quiet Christian interment. Whether these accounts hold fact or folklore, they speak to a legacy that defied destruction. What is certain from the Lanercost Chronicle is that Wallace was divided limb from limb, and his remains disposed of in several parts of the country to strike fear in others. There was no recorded rite, no monument, no final resting place known with certainty, only fragments of bone and silence. And yet, the silence didn't last. Wallace's death, and the brutal spectacle that followed, reverberated through Scotland. Rather than extinguish resistance, the Crown's cruelty deepened it. Within years, Scotland would rise again, not forgetting Wallace, but invoking him. Though scattered in life's final hour, his memory resisted conquest. What the axe tried to erase, the people preserved. Wallace's ordeal revealed how empires use fear as a tool to suppress resistance. Yet even in defeat, his broken body gave rise to a legend that outlived chains. His legacy invites us to reflect: how far should conscience bend before authority? And can the price of freedom ever truly be too high? Consider this. Which moment, capture, judgment, or punishment, best reflects the mindset of power today? Greater than, it is in truth for freedom alone, which no man of worth forsakes but with his life. Declaration of Arbroath, 1320.